Hello and welcome back to another episode of our Mega-lo-Mania in Unreal Engine. So continuing on from what we were doing yesterday regarding the mining, attempted gathering of resources. So we created the mining task, had some issues with the UI, particularly in relation to how small it is and how big our mining tasks were. Tried to fit it on there, and we've got issues with the resources not being immediately available. If we build the mine, then the resources all become available. If we move off and on again, then we can see them all in a manner of fashion. Yeah, the three that we have. So there's bits and pieces that are working enough for us to carry on. So what I wanted to do was add population to the mining tasks. So we created the buttons, or the events for the increase and decrease buttons, and we have the event tick, which we are going to use to update it. So in the player controller, I think is where we handle the page up and page down, and the assign builders. So we're going to assign miners in the same way. Custom event even. And again, we've got the replication on the server, and we'll have the name of the resource that we are going to be mining and the number of miners, which could be a negative number so that we can assign them. So again, we're going to have to check that we have a player pawn being the sector. We could clean this bit up because this is going to be consistent for quite a lot of the different scenarios in terms of assigning people, but for the time being, just going to work with what we've got. It'll be a bit easier to clean it up once the all of the bits and pieces are in place, so that we can see what we really need and what we don't need. So we've got this assign population event, or sorry, function, isn't it? It's function. This obviously is fairly generic in terms of how it works, but it is related to construction. It could be related to anything, but unfortunately it is assign builders, not population in general. Not really sure how to make it generic in that regard. One thing that I am considering though is the find population, find job, update job. They are the same kind of thing that the mine wants. Yeah, maybe they are the same. So the problem is the mining component that we've created doesn't inherit from the construction component in any way. What does the mining component do right now? Not really a lot. I didn't really use it for anything yesterday. I'm going to try and utilize the no, because it's different. It's different. The construction component works the same in terms of assigning the population. It works similar in terms of finding jobs, but update construction at that point, it works in the way that jobs should work and doesn't work in the way resources would work. But the assign population and find existing jobs are the same. I could make it a bit more generic. So what we can do, since the mining component doesn't actually do anything at the moment, let's just make sure that by deleting it. So it's referencing the castle, because I think the castle is what creates it. But I don't think that that actually uses it in any way. Nope. So the castle doesn't use it. And the player controller only just uses it there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove it first. And then I'm going to create a new one from a new blueprint from the construction component. And that gives me access to the functions that the construction component had, or has. Now obviously naming is a bit specific. It's not quite as generic as perhaps I'd like, and the construction stuff is handled within here, which you wouldn't have something specific in a base class in that way, but I can fix all that bit moving forwards. What's important now is firstly we add to the castle, we add that mining component back, and then we add to we were in the player controller. So in the player controller we can now get the mining component again, and from that we can call our assigned population. So this is going to keep the mining jobs, for want of a better word, separate from the construction jobs. The assignment of those jobs is all done the same. It basically takes a name. In a case of a mining job, it's going to be the name of the resource, takes the population and adjusts the job population. Now at the moment our job only has the name of it and the assigned population, but that should be all fine. We have a find existing job. Again, that works for the resource mining things just the same. And the update. The update is the only one that doesn't. So the update is, I think, called by the tick in the event graph. Now, as far as I can tell, if this works as it should, what we don't want to do is call the parent tick. Well, actually, what we do want to do is call the parent tick, and calling the parent tick should give us shame the overriding functions do it as an event rather than an actual function. So in this case it's an actual function that we can go to, and in the other case to override it, it's not going to be a function, it's going to be a yeah, I suppose it doesn't matter. We can create a function here, and then we can not that, override the update construction jobs and call the update mining jobs. So we just need the delta seconds in there. Now we could, instead of calling the parent tick, which will call this event, which will call this new function, we could just call the function and not the parent tick. But there may be other things that the construction component, at least as it's called now, may do that we don't want to lose. So that's how we're going to do it at the moment. I mean, there might be a slightly cleaner way with interfaces. I'm not quite sure how they work yet. And whether we can actually use them at the component level, but again, we're going to be okay with that. That's going to do what we need it to do. for the time being. So we just put a print string in here saying update mining. Take it off the screen so we don't spam it. And let's play that. Yep. So one thing that does happen when I ran that was that it was running on both the client and the server. Now obviously the client's not going to have any jobs ever to update. I do replicate into the owner, but the client shouldn't be updating them anyway. So we will do the has authority check. Get owner. Where are we? Yep, get owner. So the owner should return us our castle. Oops. And we can check the castle to make sure we've got authority to do the update. That just prevents it from being called on the clients as well. It's better. Because the client shouldn't be updating their own jobs. The server will update them, the data will replicate across, so the client will see what's the current state of those jobs anyway. I mean, that's in theory. We should check that our construction job still works. Yep, so that works as expected, and that's not on the client, but for some reason I think I just missed it being finished, and the UI doesn't reset properly anyway. Okay, so in the mining jobs we need to do quite a lot like we did in the construction jobs, really. It iterates over all of the jobs, gets the appropriate job. So there are some attributes of the job that we're not going to need in the mining case. Because we certainly don't need the time for a mining job. So do need to check that there's some population assigned, so that one we will do. And only if there's population assigned we will actually do some mining. So at that point it's actually updating the job details, which in this scenario we don't need to do. And then that's when it's completed, and again we don't need to complete. So I think, again, I know I've created this base class, effectively created the construction component as a base class, but there are some parts of it that are specific to the construction and not really generic to the mining. I will kind of refactor these classes once I've got a better understanding on what's what. So I don't know from the real game how much resources a certain amount of people should mine. So what I'm going to do is just quickly kind of make it up, and then I'll spend some time looking at the game. So we're going to divide the population by 10. And as it's an integer, we'll get a whole number anyway. I think we'll divide it by 10 by float. Come on, keep missing the pin. suppose we'll have to convert it to a float first. So we've done that because you can actually get half a resource effectively. So we want to kind of maintain that. And so that's going to be how much we want to mine. We'll multiply that by our seconds, our delta seconds, so we have some realistic amount of income. Now I would guess maybe that the different types of resources are mined at different speeds, depending on whether it's a gathered one or whether it's a mined one in one way or another. So we would have to perhaps do some lookups of what the type of resource is, how difficult it is to mine. So now we've actually determined how many we want. We have to actually get that amount from the sector. And apply it to our castle. So to do that, we have to get our castle and our sector, and then ask our sector to mine resources. So we'll do a new function on the sector to do this, because the sector is the one that has the resources, as we've discussed before. It's got what's available, and it's also got the quantity. So a new function, mine resource, and its input is the resource name and a quantity. So that's obviously going to be the quantity the game thinks we want, not necessarily the quantity we're actually going to get. But I think I'll deal with all the how much have we got left stuff a bit later on. So firstly, we need to make sure that that particular resource that they're mining is available. Get these lined up. Maybe we should do contains. Don't so much care about where it is, just so long it is there. So we do that check first. If the resource is in our available resource list, which is handled elsewhere, then we're good to continue. Given that, we kind of know that it's going to be available in our resources array, but we have to find it so we can get that value. The value is the integer of how much is left. So what we want to do is less than, no, we actually use max here, max float. So we either want, no, it's not max, we want the minimum. We want the smallest amount, either what they want or what's available. Whichever is smaller. That stops the player, or yeah, effectively the player, from mining too many things. So if they say they want 100 and there's only 10 left, then they'll only get 10. And the return value from this will be the mined quantity. So basically that's how many did you actually get. And we also want, that's a reference I think, Don't know really if that's a reference. I don't think I can change that integer, but that's okay because we can just do that value minus how much we've mined. We just got to make sure we actually take those values away, and then from that we want to add so I think one thing we need to do here is the resources. I did put them originally as an integer, but because, as I say, you can mine half a resource, it should really be a float. Hopefully that's not going to break too many things. Connect that one up instead. That's just the same. Is that happy? Okay, it's a different error. Don't want that one. Yeah, so we've got to replace the find in this case because now it's tied to the other find. So it's, firstly, that saves the awkward conversions we had, and also secondly, it's what we wanted it to be anyway. Let's get that to fit right. Okay, so our mine resource, if we've got that resource available, then find it, pick the smallest number between what we want and how many we've got, take away what we are mining, which again is that minimum value, from how much we've got, re-add it back into the map, so we replace the value, and then return. So that should handle the mining. Now the only thing we need to do now, just so that we actually know whether that works or not, is from the mining task, well actually we need to tie up the clicking as well. So we need to play a controller, cast it. From that, call our assign minus. So just have a quick reference back to how we did the plus minus in the previous case. Test sector widget, graph. Maybe we did the buttons down in this way. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so we just basically did it twice. One with a plus, one with a minus. So at the moment the mining task doesn't actually... Oh, it doesn't know what it is. Never mind. Yeah, I guess we just got to do it twice like we did in the previous case. That's -1. That's 1. In that case, we just did the whole pawn and casting and stuff. Yeah, so we checked whether we had the pawn, so I think I'll do that too. So just make sure that the player is looking at a castle. Really need to do that in 2 places, do I? Okay, so on the clicks we check we have a castle. If we have a castle, then call the assign minus. And the assign minus, come over here. Again, we check again that there's a castle. Bit of an oversight there. Don't need to do it in both places really. It does save the event call to the server, but the overhead of doing that is probably not worth it. Then we get the castle on the mining component we call assign population. But we don't know what we're doing yet, do we? I just noticed. So the castle mining component, assign population, it's over here. So the assign population actually needs a name for the resource. Assign minus, we need to take the name and the minus, so didn't tie them up, but at least they were available. Again, let's follow it through. So the click buttons, castle validation, assign minus, castle validation, mining component, assign population, authority validation. Shouldn't actually be a problem because we've called this on the server, but we'll do it nonetheless. We're calling them jobs, not mining resources or whatever, that doesn't matter. So we find an existing job. Okay, so the one thing that we don't have in this scenario is the creation of that job. The mining component doesn't call create in any way. So it'd be best to do this. We need to, the way that the construction component worked was that a job doesn't exist until you create it. One has to call begin job. and that sets up the initial time, because the principle was that in a construction job we don't have any understanding of how long something's going to take until the job's been started. So we need a similar approach for the mining. We need to call that function basically on our mining component, but let's see if we can do it straight here. So get owner, that gives us our castle, get our sector, let's do it this way for now because we want some debugging there. So I think that that's going to fail here. Yeah, so in my case, both the server and the client said that there was no sector. So the sector doesn't exist when the mining component is created. The castle is built on the sector though. Spawn the castle here. Yeah, so all of these could be pure. Make that bit cleaner. So here, where we update the available resources for the first time on building a castle, not sure if this even works based on what we've seen, but this would be a reasonable place to build those or to start those mining jobs, so to speak. Where are we in this case? Okay, so let's just see if we have any available resources after calling that. So I don't actually see that being called at all. No, there's definitely a problem here. I mean, does it even construct the castle? No, it doesn't even construct the castle in that way. I think that's the thing. I think that I noticed that before. The castle is just spawned by some other can't remember where exactly, but it's called nonetheless, and it just appears rather than actually being built, even though it's kind of needs to be there automatically for the new players. It would probably be better if it followed that kind of I've just been built process. Let's find out where it gets added. So we can put a breakpoint in there, and we can go to our window, developer tools, call stack. This tells us where we came from. So we've gone into our claim sector, which goes into our construct building. Ah, okay, so this is kind of called when we build the mine, not called when we build anything. It's basically the event for the sector for when a building is constructed after the castle. Actually seems a bit awkward because surely it would have came in here to construct one. On construction completed, comes into here, then goes into construct building, which is back where we came from. Yeah, so at least I was trying to make this the call process for claiming a sector the same, regardless of whether it's the first sector a player is claiming for the beginning of the game, or the first sector, the next sector, or the nth sector that they're claiming. This is creating our castle. We may be creating two castles there. Let's run it again. So this is the begin play of our castle. So we go into here, resume, we're here, our T-Castle event graph, begin play. If we resume again, we hit this again. Unfortunately, the call start doesn't really say where or why we came here, so maybe that must be the client actually. It's us creating the thing on the client. That's okay then. So we do create two, but technically it's one and the same. What we did want though is to find out how this process works. So once we've created the castle, we obviously bind to its destroy, so that we can clean things up. So now we're coming into on construction completed. I suppose actually what happens is we don't ever build the castle again on a given sector, so we'll never go down that route again, but I'm not particularly happy with that kind of flow. Yeah, so it does say have available resources 3, so that does actually work, but maybe we need to call that not only when a building is constructed, but also here as well. And again, that's kind of why I don't like it. It's done special cased for the castle here and for normal resources there. That should mean that yes, it means we've got some resources to start with. Now they're not the right resources, but we've got some to start with. We didn't update the UI, did we? So let's give some room for the event tick So in the event tick for the mining task, we want to get the player controller. And I don't think we do this. Yeah, we do that just there. What we'll do is we'll take that, create an actual variable for it. So that we're not doing that all the time. So for our tick, we want to get the castle and sign minus. They need to be on the player controller too. Oops. Don't really need that pin anymore, do we? So on the castle, save levels. Hi Knuckles Green. No, not. Brief answer is no, not really. There's, so far as I know, you can do forget the word that they use now. A seamless transfer between levels, which does provide you with some saved state. But if you really want to just save the level for kind of like a save game scenario, then there is the save game objects and stuff, but I haven't really looked into those kind of things yet. I've not really got to that point, so unfortunately I can't really help you. It is a matter of trying to pick out what it is that you want to save, adding it to the save object, but again, that interaction is fairly new to me. I only know of it as a high level. So one thing I didn't do was that we update the mining job. Save a ton of variables, but getting the level name is confusing. Yeah. The level names are always just the name strings values, aren't they? So I don't know how that works with saving. But could you just not save the name of the level as part of the variable? So, forgot to tie up the actual doing the mining part. Yeah, it needs to be strings and all that. Yeah, sorry I couldn't be much help. It's definitely something I'm going to have to be doing eventually, but I'm still working on kind of like the core gameplay mechanics, and saving comes a lot later. No problem. So we actually do the collection of the resources here, and the mining component, we could store the resources in the mining component, but I think they'd just be a bit awkward to get to and a bit out of the way, so it would be easier if we just store them on the castle. Again, we probably don't really want to be casting every single time. I think we probably do the same in the update construction jobs as well, I guess. Or not. If we don't need the castle, then we haven't used it. Construction jobs don't need the castle apparently. But again, we'll worry about those. That's more of a, it just makes less graph and more optimized, but it's not going to be a slow, there's not going to be enough going on to cause that type of thing to slow the game down. But since we've got the castle, we need the resources. So we had an array here for building projects, but I don't think we use that anymore. We certainly don't use the sprites because I put them all in here. So just make sure that's true. Yep, so we don't need the sprites. Building projects we're not using because we're using the construction component, at least for the time being. Researched and unlocked technologies, we'll probably have another component for them, but again, I'll just leave them in until we're sure. So we want the resources. And again, this is just going to be a name to float map. We don't need to replicate it. Yes, we do need to replicate it, don't we? We do need to replicate it because the clients need to display it. That is a bit of a problem. It's a bit irritating really, because if you can replicate an array, a map is very similar. So I don't understand quite why a map can't be replicated. It may just be something that they haven't needed to do yet or worked around in various ways, but because the only other way I can think of doing it is actually have an array of resources, an array of resource quantities. But that's really fiddly. But I can't think of another way that I can do that in this case. Because potentially the only other way is a structure, but again it seems so over the top to store a structure. But I guess to some extent that's what I've done with the construction jobs, and maybe the resource mining stuff is really the same thing. So a little bit of awkward working around, but I'm just utilising the structure that I have and the current time. Current time is going to store my resource quantity, in that construction job object. This is again where utilizing the construction job stuff has helped with maybe the assign function and the find function, but it's not really helped a great deal in other cases. But we'll take that. That does mean again that the mining component is actually storing the resources, but we'll see how that pans out. So we need to get the mining component. We're on the pawn. The pawn is the sector, so we need the castle, I think. Yep. To do that, we need to cast it to the sector. From the sector, we can get the castle. So we need to make sure it's ours and all that kind of stuff. We have that in our other widget, sector test widget, I think. Must be this one actually. Yeah, so we get the pawn, check that that's valid, cast it to a sector, get the castle, check that that's valid, get what we want from that. Wonder if we can see if the macro library for widget, so this will be what have we called the other ones? I must have put the other ones somewhere else. Yeah, widget macro library, typo and all. So in the widget macro library, we can get the player pawn, check that that's valid, cast it to a sector, get the castle, check that that's valid. So we want to output the castle and execution, and input execution. So that would be get player castle. So effectively we can replace all of that with this. And we can use that within our mining task. So in this case we pass it in, but actually we're using get player pawn there, so we don't need to get the player controller anyway. So actually we don't need any of that. From the castle reference we can, actually we'll just change that. Castle reference is a bit specific, we just want a castle. So from the castle we can get our mining component. Now one thing we... Oh yeah, we get the player pawn, so we're definitely looking at the sector that the player owns, obviously. So from the mining component we should be able to get the jobs. Now obviously the jobs in this case are actually our resources that we haven't actually started yet. I did forget that part, though we did look in it before. So this particular tick references one particular resource, so we need to make sure we've got that resource and only handle that resource. And then for that we want to set the assigned population and the quantity. If it's ours. Assigned population is fairly straightforward, as is the quantity, but only because we're using the current time for the time being. So the only thing that I haven't done now is actually start those jobs. So we added the bit of update available resources. Basically when the construction was completed we do it. This is in the widget, not the right place. Yes, I'm wondering if the available resources does actually need to know how many are left. Oh no, the client doesn't, because if you don't have any left then it should take the resources away. But I'm not sure if it doesn't take it away unless you can't mine it and you don't actually have any. There's a scenario where you can't mine it, but you do have some, and therefore you see it in kind of a partially shown way within the resource screen. So that's something that I haven't accounted for here. Again, there's this issue with propagating the quantity. Maybe there's a difference between what resources are actually available and what resources you have. So the sector determines which resources are available, but it's the mining component that actually has the jobs. I don't really want to well, I certainly can't create those jobs twice, so let's just kind of run with it again. We're in the sector, so from the castle we want to get the mining component, and we want to find existing job, and and we want to do this for all of the resources. So for all of the available resources, we find the existing job. If it's not found, if it is found, we don't do anything. If it's not found, we want to add it. Okay, we don't really need the construction job, but we do need the construction component. Begin job. So it's name and time. Current time is obviously going to be 0 in our case. So if it's not found, we want to begin the job, but I think we begin the job on here. So we begin the job, and the name is that, and the time is just 0. Oh no, if it is not found. See where we stand with that. Okay, so nothing happened, be it success or errors. So what we'll do is we'll add print string in here, and we just print out the name of the resource. See what we've got in there. Yeah, so they're definitely that's all being printed out, so we've got the jobs. Then we need to go to the player controller. Now let's start with a mining task. The reduce and the increase are the wrong way round. That's not going to be good. So just switch them around. Prefer the increase at the top and reduce at the bottom. I could have just changed the numbers, but then the whole thing would be upside down. Okay, so still don't get any effect there. So let's follow it through. So we're increasing the population. That's F8. Oh. Yep, so increase the population. Is our pawn valid? No. Apparently. Oh, it is valid now. So then we go into assign minus. Oops. That did not take us anywhere. Should have taken us there. Let's try that again. Yep, so we come into assign minus. We have 1 miner, 4 wood, which is correct. Go into assign population. I think I know one issue that's definitely going to be true. We don't replicate that component. So the construction component we replicate, the mining component we don't. Let's see if that makes any difference. These numbers have changed now. They've gone from 3 zeros to 1 0. That's promising. There we go. So we can see the higher the number, the faster this seems to change. So in the mining task, we can do some changes here. I actually only want to show one decimal place. Makes it look a bit neater. So we know that the game doesn't actually show us anything other than halves. But what we can do is do some rounding on our quantity and just make sure that it's either half or 1 or any kind of variation of that. So if you're mining less than half a resource, either the player doesn't see it, or, well, I suppose the player wouldn't be able to see it. So yeah, I'm not sure how to do that 100%, because we want to, if the player is mining 0.1 of a resource every second, they should see something after 5 seconds. Whereas without showing the point as a whole, then that might be a bit difficult. But nonetheless, the resource gathering is now working. If we go to 10, we're gathering 10 times as quick, maybe. So one thing that we could fix up is the buildings again. The only one that actually works is the mining one. The others don't. One thing that we've got a similar issue here where we have the begin construction process that's initiated by randomly clicking on the icon, whereas really we want the construction component to just know about the things that we can construct, because they're not going to change within the course of the game. A sector can construct all of those things. I think that's a bit of an... Yeah, it kind of just made me think that the construction component currently sitting on the castle, whereas perhaps it's not the castle that should be building those things. I have to give that some thought, because the castle itself needs to be built in the same way moving forwards anyway. When the player moves an army onto a sector, then the castle needs to be built over time, given the amount of people that are on the sector. And it probably would be nicer if it didn't have it kind of working in 2 places. And given the player is controlling the pawn, the pawn is actually the sector. Yeah, it kind of goes back to the attempt at divorcing what the player does in the castle effectively by owning the sector, and what the sector can do when it's not owned. And one issue with putting all the construction down in the sector is that it's the castle that holds the population, which makes some sense. But another thing that is important to know is that the sector holds the reference to the buildings. The buildings exist on the sector itself. And obviously the castle construction component would have to check the sector to say, do we have a mine already? And if so, then you can't build it. And those kind of things would almost make more sense if they're actually done within the sector. But the only consideration I can see that causes a problem is that when you assign population to construction work, they need to come from the castle, because the castle holds the population. But since the assignment is done in the way that it comes from the player controller, yeah, I think the construction, maybe not as a component, maybe just as part functions and stuff of the sector, would actually work fairly well. Again, I'm not convinced about these components. I don't know whether they're meant to be trying to section off some of the code, but we've got many ways we can do that within the sector. We can have another event graph as a whole to handle these kind of construction side of things. We can obviously have functions. The sector already has functions to handle construction, so it wouldn't really be that difficult to group them up. So I'll have to give that some thought, and maybe I'll change it around. It may make some more sense if the construction was completely managed by the sector. But as I said before, what we have gained from the mining component inheriting from the construction component is the find job-based system and the assigning of the population, but they could be done as macros or as functions or anything. And as we've used the jobs and the the total current time to determine the quantity of resources, but it would be better not to. So yeah, I think that makes some sense. Make a note of that. So, I think we really have achieved the goal of what I kind of wanted to do at a minimum today. We have resource gathering. Available resources isn't right. Let's see if we can fix that. Why do we see all of the resources when we shouldn't actually see all of the resources? So let's update available resources. Let's find out what happens when we go in there. So we clear the available resources, and now we're iterating over the resources that we have. On this sector, we get that resource. Can we see its name yet? So I think that first resource is a bit annoying that none of the variables show up. But it's definitely wood. So into the next one. Yeah, that's in the wrong place as well. Checking whether we've got a castle on each loop doesn't make any sense, where really we shouldn't do any of this. If there's no castle, there's no resources available. So that's in the wrong place. But anyway, so come over here. So this one is should be an open pit. So we should go into that branch. Yep. Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, I get it. It's when I merge this together I break the logic. Ore is okay because open pit, a deep mine one should be time ore mine, but that's not true. that one. Yeah, I'll leave it like that. It's close enough. So now we shouldn't see them all. Given the default epoch for this, the sector, we should see those two. If the mine was available, it would be actually... It should actually be the mining hole, the deep pit. Now we see the mine. Now if we move off and on the sector, that one and that one, we see all of the resources that we should have. Don't think the scroll box works very well, but it works. It does what we needed to do. So that's a mining task, but we did actually have the basic task for the construction in place. Well, kind of. We haven't actually fleshed it out. Yeah, so the mining task is very similar, but it's laid out slightly differently. So I can't really share much between that and the basic task. So remember, we do increase first and then reduce. I suppose it should be decrease really, just to make the opposite. And a lot of this is going to be the same as our sector test widget event graph. We have mine construction, that's what we're looking for. All of those. So a bit too much duplication there, so we'll just drop the bottom section. Tie everything up correctly. So again, we are double checking if we've got a castle, because we check in the appropriate function as well, but it's okay. So that's the plus and the minus. And now we just need the tick and the update. Update mine construction. So some of them aren't going to be valid. Update timer image function's not valid, so we need to get that. Update timer image. So we need the timer frames. Which is a paper sprite array. So timer image, Oh, we don't have that function yet. Update timer image. Not a variable. Not a macro. Update timer image. So we know that's going to need an image. And we know it's going to need a time. So it needs... And to be fair, it doesn't actually need the image, it just needs the time. Is a float, because the timer image is here. Copy all of that. That's okay. So event graph. Oh, it seems to have tied that up okay, except we just don't need the image. And do need the time though. I haven't named it. Time. Oh. Why can't it have time? Do we use time somewhere else? Oh. Remake time. Do. Don't need it again. Let's take that one away. So don't need either of those. So mine remaining time is just actually remaining time. And mine builders is assigned population. Okay. All of that we don't need anymore. So on the tick we get the player castle, get the construction component, find the existing job for mine. That's not true because this is not just for the mine. So we need a name. Here's one we made earlier. If we found the job, we break it, we've got the current time, assign population, and we set everything. So that should pretty much be it done. I say there's only one piece that we're missing, and that's the kind of begin job part in the construction case. But we can begin the mine, and we can see that our mine has updated. Allocate some population, and yeah, it's working correctly. So the only thing that's not working is the beginning of it. Not too much. And that's what I was saying before. We really don't need the construction component to be told what to start, because the construction component should know everything. So for the time being, we are going to just call begin job. Yeah, so we're doing this on authority anyway, so we don't need to worry too much about the reliably replicated server part. And there's only 3 buildings we can build by default. That'll be the mine. We've actually set that to 12, I think, and we'll do that for 24. Actually, we'll do it for 15, just so that we've got that one loop round, and 45 should be fine. So that's the mine, the factory, and the lab. Oops, did not need to do that. So now they're all set, we can increase the population on the mine, the factory, and the lab. Not quite. Not quite. Where did we go wrong? It might be simply that the basic tasks aren't initialized correctly for the other jobs, maybe? Factory. Lab. Looks a bit alright from that perspective. So the sector widget, so what we can do is just drop the whole pre-created horizontal box with all the stuff. We don't need that. Jump into and compile this. Now we're going to get a whole bunch of errors, so we can get rid of certain stuff. So the mine construction, so on clicked for the increase builders is gone, reduce builders is gone, update mine construction, that's gone too. So the whole graph is gone. Yeah, so at the moment we're pre-creating them here, and we don't actually allow the name. There's no way to give it the name when we construct it by simply putting it down into the actual gadget itself. So much like we did with the resources, we can take out the mine, the factory, and the lab, rename that to the building container as a variable. Just make sure the height. Actually, maybe we should just put the building container inside the scroll box. So wrap that with a vertical box. Put the building container in that too. Delete that. And that gives us just one scroll box for all of this instead of having two. Make the height a bit bigger. Did we make the height a bit bigger? Yep. So the container should fill. Vertical blocks should fill. Resource container, yep. See how that looks. Oh, some more issues. Update mine construction. Yeah, so we don't need that one. There's probably other bits and pieces we don't need there, or we could do differently, but we'll get back to that. On construction complete. Yeah, so this was attempting to reset the job when we build it like that. Yeah, so when we click on the image, actually that whole button down part we don't need on mouse button down. We do need to deal with that when a building is completed. We want to get rid of the widget, I think, really, to be fair. Okay, so we've got our 2 resources and no buildings in there. That's okay. So on construction completed. Don't want that function. So what we'll do is after the resources, maybe they should be before actually, before the resources, we'll have a new function called render construction tasks. And take that. Just need to tie one of those up together as a box. Be the mine, factory, get rid of that lab. We tie that up. So basically we want to iterate over all the 3 buildings we want. For each of those, we want to create not a mining task but a basic task widget which takes a name and add it to the vertical box, which is our building container. So now we see our resources and we see our buildings. We don't see our building images though. So we're taking the sprite in as well. That should be okay. Let's do a map instead. So if we just tie that up to the key, it gives us our so in this case we'll just do a map. We could probably use the cause our key is a map again, so we could use our for each item loop. I think we just need a variable, let's say paper sprite, so I have something to connect to that, and then I can pick the mine, factory, delete that one, and the variable, and the lab. That should actually give us a sprite now then. Yep, there we go. So now we have our sprites, we have our initial times. Can't quite get to the bottom, but we should be able to build all the... Okay, so they all go into the mine. That's not fun. Basic task. Yep, so we do the mine there. We need to take the name. So we tell it which one to actually do properly. Let's try again. So we can see the time is different for them all. Let's just hurry the factory up. So that clearly finished, but it didn't actually build the mine. sorry, the factory. The mine did build. I assume the lab isn't going to build either. Yeah, I think the lab's finished now as well. We only see the factory. However, that might be because of the tech level we're on. We haven't actually put those checks in yet to say, is it actually possible to build the mine on this level? So somewhere around here we build the epochs. There we go. To build the sectors. So now they should show up as a different tech level, and they should have all the buildings available. So there's the mine, the factory, and the lab. So that works. Obviously still some rough edges to fix in terms of what buildings are available on the sector, and obviously where they are positioned on the sector. But the basics are there in terms of getting those buildings to work, and even the UI is not too far off either. If we move off and on, we'll actually see that we get the rest of the resources as well, our new alien resource, because now we have the mine. So that's another thing. So yeah, I think that pretty much concludes what I intended to do today and what I really wanted to get done. Particularly the mining stuff. I think the fixing up the buildings quite good as well. But particularly wanted to get those minings done. Has highlighted that maybe the way that things are constructed could be improved. There's definitely an advantage with, or there has been a kind of a simplicity of having the mining component basically inherit from the construction component, but as it's panned out, they're not that similar. And the construction component probably does want to handle more about the buildings and maybe be a little bit less dynamic. And as I say, maybe I'll just merge that into the sector anyway, because the sector has to deal with all the buildings, and it already deals with a fair amount of things about the buildings, so it kind of makes sense that it might as well just fully know about them. And it might help with things like adding the references and cleaning up those references if all of the stuff about how their entire life cycle is handled by this one class. But some fairly good progress, at least today. Probably spawned from yesterday's limited progress, but that's just the way it is. Hopefully I'll be back, I think maybe tomorrow or Wednesday. I'm not quite sure which day yet, but hopefully one of those 2 days. So thanks for watching, and that's all for now, so thank you again.